Last week, we read the remaining part of Hebrews and we read Titus, Timothy, and Philemon. Remember, Hebrews is reading for both believers and unbelievers. And then when we get to chapter 6, verse 10, he encourages us that God is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. And what that is saying is that he will always reward our labor of love. Whatever you're doing for God in the house of the Lord or even outside the house of the Lord, whatever you're doing for the Lord, as in blessing people, taking care of the house of the Lord, doing things for God, that you should not be weary, that God will always reward our labor of love. And then when we get to chapter 8 is actually talking about the greatness of Jesus' ministry. And then when we get to verse 12 of chapter 8, is actually an assurance that God is always merciful to us. There are times that we do some things, we go astray from the presence of God, we don't thank God enough, we miss some things. It's saying that sometimes even in that storm, in that situation, God is merciful and is always with us. And then when we get to chapter 9 and 10, it continues to talk about just the sovereignty of Jesus. Chapters 9 and 10 talks about the sovereignty of Jesus. Chapter 11 is what I call the Faith Chronicles. And I call it the Faith Chronicles because that chapter talks about everyone that waited on God, that had faith in God, and God did something and answered their prayers, that when they had faith in God, God answered their prayers. And when we get to chapters 12 and 13, 12 and 13 is actually like a continuation of chapter 11 and was just telling us that we should also hold on to God in faith, that God will always answer. And then he also encourages us to love one another, to be patient with one another, to obey the laws of the land, and to obey the laws of the church as well. That is what chapters 12 and 13 tells us. And then we get to Titus chapters 1 to 3. The book actually addresses order in the church and what sound teaching is all about, and he also addresses social services and our service and conduct both in and outside the church. That it's not just that we should live right in the church and live like somebody else outside, that our conduct both in and outside the church should be the same thing, such that anywhere people see you, they can say, oh, this is a Christian, or oh, this is a child of God. And then we get to Philemon. Philemon is actually one of Paul's love letters. You know, about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, I was talking about Paul writing love letters and that we should also get into the habit of checking on somebody by writing love letter. Philemon is actually one of those love letters that Paul wrote to the children of Israel and to the Christians, and he actually addresses forgiveness and reconciliation. Every one of his love letters is always addressing something else. Philemon actually addresses reconciliation and forgiveness. And then we read Timothy, 1 Timothy chapters 1, 2, 3. 1 Timothy chapters 1, 2, and 3. Chapter 1 speaks to the ministry of one who is called a Christian. That is, if you say you're a Christian, what are some of the attributes that we should see in you that would say, yes, this is a Christian? And then chapter 2 also encourages us to pray for our leaders. And when we say leaders, we're not just talking about leaders in the church. We're talking about leaders both in the church and outside the church, the country where you live, the city where you live. You're supposed to be praying for your president, your minister, your mayor, your governor, whoever is in the position of authority, that we should pray for them, because only when we pray for them will they do right by God. And then chapter 3 is actually a list of characters that is expected of somebody that wants to hold an office in the church. For example, you want to hold the office of a pastor, office of a bishop, office of a deaconess. And this one actually addresses the office of a bishop and a deacon in the Bible. That what are the characters, what are the things that are expected of these people? And that is what that chapter 3 talks about. I hope you're enjoying this. We have just, I think, 3 more weeks to finish reading the Bible, and we will have gone through the Bible the entire year. I hope you've been enjoying it. I have been enjoying it. I've learned a lot, and I pray that you have a blessed week.